You know that Albert Einstein once said that you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. And I think that's sort of what Frankie has in mind here for us this morning. So thank you very much. And Frankie, please.
Thank you. It's not often in life, I must say, that one is introduced by one's hero. And I'm a groupie. I'm a Hans Herren groupie. So thank you, Hans. That was just beautiful. I will also ask that I have a sign-up sheet. My daughter and I, maybe once a quarter, we do not inundate people, but we do have an e-letter that goes out telling people what we're excited about, what we're doing. I work with my daughter, Anna Lappe, who's doing this amazing video work now, educating people about the myths of our food system. And so if you'd like to get that e-letter, if you could just pass this. Thank you. I also want to begin by saying that if I didn't deserve a Feisty Woman Award, I'm determined to. Actually, this yesterday made me more feisty. I have to tell you, the panel that Hans referred to, yeah, that really put fire in the belly. So here we go. The only remaining question is, how do I advance the slides? Okay, got it. Okay, so I think you can kind of see them. I'll begin this talk the way I ended last evening with the spirit in which I get up in the morning, a quote from D. Hock, who said, "Things are far too bad and it is far too late for pessimism." So I take that seriously, and it's time that we all become more feisty. Now, feisty has to also be effective, right? So, the theme of my life now, in a way, is that in order to really know where we should put our energy, we all need to have a working hypothesis on how we got into this mess. And can I just say, there's no hand mic, right? Is that true? There is. Could I use a hand mic? Sure. I have to walk when I talk, so that would help me a lot. I realized that I was stumbling because I couldn't walk. We'll get this together. While you're walking up here, let me also say that my parents founded a Unitarian church in Fort Worth, Texas, during the McCarthy era. They were feisty too, and I'm going to give you my pathway that I got here and then what my working theory is. So here I started. I started at, I would say, as a desperate young woman at 25, 26, trying to understand how I could choose a life path that would actually get to the roots of suffering. So, and here I am, you can't really see me, but I'm asking the question, why hunger? Huh? You know, what is it about? Because the newspaper headlines, the experts were all telling us that famine was inevitable, we were running out of food, we'd hit the Earth's limits. And I thought, if I could just understand why people are hungry, that would unlock the mysteries of economics and politics. So I began asking that question. Why are we hungry? And very soon I found out that, well, actually, just sitting in the UC Berkeley library with my dad's slide rule, I realized that there was more than enough food for all of us, and we were actually creating scarcity from plenty. And that is more true today. So today, we still hear the theme of scarcity, but the reality is that, I say here, scarcity, really? For every person every day, the world produces a few pounds of food, 2,800 calories of food, and worldwide, since I wrote Diet for a Small Planet, the per capita production of food in the world has grown 40%. And as I love to say it, that's just on the leftovers. What I'm saying is that, oh, wait, did you skip one? Did you skip one?
The next one I see.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's just go back. Okay, let's just go back. Just as I thought I had everything under control. Okay, it's okay.
Let me see that first. I don't think I saw it.
Oh. Is that better?
No.
What?
No.
The same?
Louder.
It's louder? So, okay, no, that's right. I'm sorry. Yes, we're all awake. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, no, this is okay. Sorry. That is true. There's all this abundance and yet massive hunger. And so what we see then is today, among all of this abundance and waste, there are still 842 million people. And let me be clear, that number from the UN, that only is about the most severe hunger that lasts over a year. That's just a very narrow measure. And 2 billion of us are missing essential nutrients. And to me, the most heart-wrenching statistic of all is that 1 of 4 children on Earth today are stunted, meaning that's a health term, meaning that it is lifelong impairment. This is what happens in the first 2,000 days of life when you're undernourished. So this is the reality. So here's my question. And it kept growing and growing. And I realized that, no one gets up in the morning saying, yes, I want another child to go hungry. So it grew to this question. Why are we together creating a world that none of us as individuals would choose? That's been the question that's been pushing me forward for the last 15 or 20 years. And so I've been helped by a lot of great thinkers, particularly Erich Fromm, who many of you remember. He should be rehabilitated or rediscovered, I should say. But I learned that it helps to think about what is unique about human consciousness. And one of the special things about us, we think, is that we see the world not as it is, but as we are. We see the world through mental filters, if you will. So Einstein, for example, said, it is theory which decides what we can observe. In other words, what are we looking for? We tend to see what we are looking for, and we tend to not see what we're not looking for. And let me just put this in very, very homey terms. A few years ago, I got up on Thanksgiving morning knowing that there were about 35 people to arrive in the afternoon. And so I got busy to make my favorite root vegetable dish. And I went to the kitchen and looked for my Dutch oven. And I knew that exactly where it was, I thought, and it wasn't there. I looked in the cupboards, it wasn't there. I looked in the basement, it wasn't there. I gave up. And then maybe an hour later, I turn around, and there it is. Except I had put a plant in it. So I couldn't see it because it didn't fit my mental map. I was looking for something that would go in the oven, not a planter, even though, as you'll see, it was big and red, right? And I started laughing out loud, and I said, oh, yes, we see what we expect to see. And so that has really formed my life. We hear the term, seeing is believing, but actually, believing is seeing is my new motto. So here we are. So that wouldn't be so bad if the mental map that we absorb in our culture and now going worldwide, if it wouldn't be so bad if it were life-serving. But my thesis is that you and I are alive in this moment where the dominant mental map is fundamentally life-destroying. And what on earth do I mean by that? I mean that its core premise is lack. Lack of goods and lack of goodness. By goods, I mean everything from food to energy to parking places. There's not enough of anything. And the assumption, the lack of goodness, is that if you peel away the fluff, the only thing we can really count on is that human beings are selfish, competitive, and materialistic. Yeah, the other things are nice, but what can we count on? We are essentially selfish little shoppers, right? So with those ideas, the scarcity of goods and goodness, it's a scary world. It's a scary world. We're in this competitive race with each other to get what's there, which is not enough for all of us, so we better fight hard. It's a very scary world. And it's based on what I like to call the 3 S's of separateness, stasis, scarcity. The idea that everything is disconnected, it is fairly static, human nature especially, you know, we are what we are, we're fixed, we're good or bad, but that's it, and then scarcity. So this creates what I call the fog of fear. We see the world very fearfully, and we know that fear actually itself clouds our vision. So here we are. It starts, I would say, this, thank you, this scarcity, scare, mental map. I'm trying to hold this right so it doesn't give you that, whoa, it doesn't work. Oh, turn this off? Oh, thank you. Okay, so this scarcity, the 3 S's. Now you can't hear. Well, I might have to go back to the podium mic. Is this not on? Break free from, you know, our brains are actually, the neural connections are set to see the world in a certain way after we've been believing and seeing it that way for so long. Can we change? Yes, we can. And I think that one thing that helps is what I call moments of dissonance. And while one would think that continuation of hunger in a world of plenty would create a lot of dissonance, it certainly does for me, but now there are 2 additional things that are creating moments of dissonance. And one of them, I'll just do this real quickly, one of them is, one of them is, of course, climate change. And the realization that now our food system could be contributing half of the global greenhouse problem. And the second crisis that could be, because that touches everyone. I'm saying a moment of dissonance when we realize, wait a minute, this is not working. And the second is that another crisis that is touching all of us now is the health crisis. We are experiencing a pandemic of diet-related disease. I won't even take time to go through all the numbers there, but 1 billion people suffer hypertension, 500 million people obese, and on and on. And just a little vignette, or a little story I've learned from a doctor I'm in communication with in Andhra Pradesh, India. He says that in his clinic, 2,000 very, very poor Indians come through every month, and 60% are suffering diabetes and heart conditions. And these are people who are getting enough calories, he said, but this is what's happening. 40% of our children's calories in the United States are empty calories. So here is a second kind of, hopefully, where more and more people are touched by this health crisis, just as we're touched by climate change, and we'll have that dissonance that can begin to think, oh, maybe there's another way of seeing things. So shock, the jolt, can sometimes really be helpful. And again, the question is, how do we move? How do we create the sort of the new stream beds in our neural connections so that we can see the world with new eyes? And what I'm suggesting is possible, is that because of now the whole new science of ecology emerging and so many changes in our understanding of the world, that we can move from the 3 S's to the 3 C's. From separateness to connection, from stasis to continuous change, from scarcity to co-creation. And on the right here, connection, continuous change, and co-creation, This is now where virtually all of science, of course, is telling us that this is the nature of life, that we have this false sense of separateness, that we are all connected moment to moment, shaping each other, shaping all of our worlds, that there is no separation. And I love to quote Dennis Noble, he's a physiologist at Oxford, who says, in biological systems, there are no privileged components telling the rest what to do. Rather, there is a system in which all elements are shaping all other elements moment to moment. And my friend Hans-Peter Dürer in Germany says, he said to me, Frankie, in biological systems, there are no parts, there are only participants. And so that begins to then open up a whole new way of seeing, that if this is true, which science now confirms that we are all connected, the nature of life is continuous change, then what does that mean for each of us? We are each co-creating, whether we like it or not. So the only choice we don't have is whether to change the world. Because we are. The choice we do have is how. So it's a very empowering, this really changed my life writing this book, Eco-Mind, to realize how deeply true that is, that every act we take sends ripples, no matter for good or not. So we have the power to choose how, but not whether we change the world. And so I started then thinking about various messages that help us from seeing and how we can reframe them. And so, for example, I think that I would ask us all to really think about using metaphors like we've hit the limits of a finite earth, because that still keeps us in this quantitative scarcity scare mode. And actually, it's kind of absurd to think that we've hit the limits of nature. What we've done is we've broken the regenerative laws of nature, but that's a very different reality. So when you say we've hit the limits of nature, wait a minute. The sun supplies us 15,000 times the daily dose of energy. Certainly we haven't hit the limits of energy. And certainly we haven't hit the limits of food, because we know that indeed there's more than enough now, and we know how to grow food sustainably. So what I love to think is the key to my sanity is that we can move from this limits frame, this quantitative, we've hit the limits, how do we shrink back, to we can align with the laws of nature, and there's more than enough for all. And so this is really the basic shift of mindset, from limits to alignment. Alignment means that we now know, in part through Hans' brilliant work, and so many of you too, that we know that the more deeply we understand how the natural world works, the more we can align with solutions, like the solutions that allowed Hans to find this solution to this agricultural threat in Africa, for which he won the World Food Prize. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. And it's not just, of course, aligning with nature outside of us, it's aligning with our own nature. What brings out the best and the worst in us? First, we know we can all be bullies, but if we look at what we also know, what anthropology, there's a lot of interesting new anthropology, new MRI studies of what is human nature, and there's more and more evidence that yes, we can be brutal bullies, but we have these magnificent capacities for empathy and cooperation. My favorite MRI study at Emory University, they looked at people's brains when they were cooperating and when they were competing, and guess what? When we cooperate, there are stimulated neurons that are similar to what happens when we eat chocolate. That's how much we evolved to enjoy cooperation. I just love that, since I love chocolate. So we know that we have it in us. And here is the core lesson of ecology, that every single organism and ecosystem is shaped by its context. And we are an organism, we human beings. So we then would say, okay, what is the context? What are the conditions that bring out these fantastic qualities? And they happen to be exactly the opposite of, anyway, they have, I'll get to that in a minute. They enable this positive capacities, enable the emergence of the eco-mind spiral, the power, the spiral of empowerment. Because if we start with this assumption that we do have it in us, and we begin to think about what are the conditions that bring out these qualities, then we realize that we can create true democracies. And we can get money out of our political system. And I'm going to bring that home at the very end of this talk. And we can then create rules that keep the market serving us, our values, serving life. And then we start seeing solutions, and the spiral, this virtuous spiral, intensifies. And so what that tells us then is that we then, putting all this together, we have a compass. We have a compass. We know now, if we look at what brings out the worst, the opposite brings out the best. The continuous dispersion of power, I've come to call it inclusive power, number one. Transparency and mutual accountability, the opposite of the negative conditions. And that then makes possible what I call living democracy. Democracy is not what we have, but what we do. It's not just a structure of government that we inherited somewhere off in Washington. It is a culture that we create together. It is a living organism that is continually evolving, that meets our need for meaning, connection, and power. And so I think that my youthful intuition that food could help us understand the problem and solutions was right on. And one of the reasons is that food, this is my food power slide, it just says it connects our bodies to each other, to the earth. What power? It's a power to break free of the scarcity mind, because as we see this tremendous abundance, how can we think scarcity? When we see the joy in the children, how can we think that we're just these selfish little critters? So, I'm going to then just give a few examples here of what happens when we take this eco-mind approach of the 3 C's and apply it to the world of food and agriculture. And I want to jump to India. These are women of the Deccan Development Society that I visited just a year ago exactly. And what I'm suggesting is that when I mention those 3 conditions of inclusive power, transparency, and mutual accountability, here they are, the living of it. They are living democracy. They are in this group. They are pledging to one another to not use GMOs and to share their knowledge with others and to use organic methods. And this is an organization now that has operating in this full form in about 75 villages in a dry area of southern India, Andhra Pradesh. And I wanted to go to talk to them. And I asked them, what was life like before you've accomplished what you've accomplished? And then I will explain what they've done. They said life was dark. They used that word more than once. They described being beaten by their husbands, bullied by the landlord. They were so poor they had one sari. They couldn't even fully wash their clothing. They had to wash a piece of it at a time and let it dry. Life was so dark. They were constantly hungry, they said. And I don't have time to explain how it all began, but trust me that they began over time to reclaim some land and to reject GMOs, reject chemical agriculture, because there was so much poisoning from pesticides and losses related to BT cotton that they rejected all of that and have gone for the most beautiful form of agroecology, growing of 20 plants. The field we walked through of about an acre that day, it had about 20 plants growing in it, a whole range of millets, which by the way have many multiple times the amount of iron that white rice does. And of course, iron is such a big problem, the lack of iron, especially for women in the world. So, but there were oil seeds, there were greens, there was dal, the lentils for protein, and they were beaming with pride as they told me about their accomplishments. And now, whereas they were in near famine conditions regularly in their villages, now they said they have absolute food security. And this next slide is pretty dark. You can't see their beaming faces with absolute dignity and joy. They have their own marketing co-op, processing, and they have their own radio station that they share. They petitioned the Indian government for 7 years to get their radio station, and they share knowledge about what they're doing in this agroecological approach, and they share knowledge about health and hygiene as well. One of my favorite stories about this broader network is that there was a young woman, a 19-year-old, these are all very, very poor women, and she bet her husband that her organic practices would outperform his chemical ones. And so they decided to have a contest. And so half the field was planted in the chemical approach and half in the organic approach. And guess what? At the end of the season, her approach made 50% more return. And he converted. And then she became a local hero, and she was tapped by the government of Andhra Pradesh to be an extension agent to teach what she had done. So, and this is an area, I just made a note here, this is an area that was called, at one time, the pesticide capital of the world, and that half of the farming costs, according to World Bank, had come from 3 corporate-controlled inputs, seeds and fertilizers, pesticides, and that is what they freed themselves from. And now they go around, every year they have a caravan with bells and, it's beautiful, dancing. They have a caravan that goes from village to village. This year, it was 55 villages, and they teach seed saving and sharing. And it's a very powerful example. I'm going to jump very quickly to Brazil in a very different story. In Brazil, because of citizen social movements that ultimately created the Workers' Party and ultimately elected a worker, hey, imagine that, President Lula, on a platform that was very much about the right to food. And this is, Fome Zero means zero hunger, and now it has so many different aspects to it. But I had the privilege, when my daughter and I wrote our book together, Hope's Edge, we traveled to a city that was one of the inspirers of this national program, Zero Hunger. Because in '95, they elected a mayor who ran on the platform of the right to food, food as a right of citizenship. And as a result of that, this is a city of Belo Horizonte in Brazil, 2.5 million people. Very, very high rates of hunger, and they created a collaborative, inclusive power, to use my new favorite term, inclusive power, where many, many different groups were represented, from small farmers, large farmers, some institutional buyers like hospitals, local government, university was involved, labor unions involved, and they came up with all these different ideas. And one of them is here, this straight from the countryside, that local farmers assigned choice spots in the inner city, and because they cut out the middleman, which I learned yesterday on our panel, took I think we learned that the middlemen before this program, they would have 100% markup on their produce, and now with this straight from the countryside, without the middleman, just the farmer selling the food, they can sell it at a price that the poorest people in the inner city can buy this great produce. And that's just one of many things that they do. They post in the bus stops, they post, and on the radio, where can you get the cheapest price for the basic food commodities, so that there can't be that price gouging that poor people have to live with here in the United States, for example. So it keeps the market honest. And they also have these Now they have 4 what they call popular restaurants. They don't demean people. It's not means tested. The big open air areas, I got to visit one of them, and now they serve 20,000 meals a day. 20,000 meals a day. There are 4 of these big restaurants, and it costs 25 cents for breakfast and 45 cents for lunch. And people from all, so many different walks of life come and enjoy this. Now, this is just a taste of what has been done. Now, I want to tell you the most astonishing fact of results that I think I've encountered. I don't know, my daughter took that great picture of these little kids in Bello. But in 12 years, think about this, 12 years, they cut the death rate of children under 5 by 73%. We can do this, we can do this. And when I asked Adriana Ranha, who was a leader of the coordinating, of facilitating as a government official, but using that convener role, that powerful role that government can play, I said, Adriana, do you realize how out of step you are when this right to food, and this was back 10 years ago, and she said, yes, but what I didn't realize is how easy it is to end it. And what she meant is just, we know what to do, we know how to do it, and look what they accomplished. Now, this was not just what was happening in Bello, because there are federal programs, most centrally the conditional cash transfer in Brazil, that has helped lead to that result. So here I want to get more personal. My bottom line right now, and this is why I love this feisty woman thing, because my theme song for a long time, but I've got to step up my game, but my theme song for a long time has been, human beings are good enough. The problem for us is that we are so social, we are so deeply embedded with one another, that the real challenge is speaking the truth, is breaking from the pack. Even though we're having these, all these moments of dissonance, do we really break out? And I feel like I'm in a room of people who have been willing to break with the pack. But for most people, that is the hardest thing of all, to speak up against where the rest of the culture, the rest of the tribe appears to be going. And so I think that the most important thing that we can do is to focus on that, focus on what I call bold humility. Bold humility. And that means rethinking fear itself. And I'll just say shorthand, for me that means a lesson I learned via Wangari Maathai in Kenya, the same time I met Hans for the first time. It's too long to tell, but it's a great story. Anyway, I'll stop. Okay, what I got from it was that fear is not out there, it's just in us. And therefore, it's just energy that we can do whatever we want to with it. We can turn it into, let's run, let's get out of here, let's freeze. Or we can turn it into power. So, for me, it's really hard. I grew up very conflict averse, and so I get this terrific pounding heart when I feel like I'm breaking with the tribe. But you know what I did one day? It dawned on me that instead of that, I always get this, and then I'd say, Frankie, you wimp, what's your problem? And now, you know what I say? Inner applause. And it says, okay, you're at your edge, great for you, keep going. So that's my inner applause message. So here's the deal. So how do we build courage? And I feel like I'm preaching to people who don't need particular coaching on this, but I'll tell you anyway. So I think that, clearly a lot of it is that recognizing how social we are, that we need to be building new tribes, and clearly you are. Tribes that will reinforce us to keep going with that pounding heart. And clearly you've got that. I think that we recognize that, what the new science is telling us, that every thing that we take in. They've discovered mirror neurons, you know, in our brains that mean that when we observe something or just read about it, actually it's if we're experiencing it. So when I'm going like this, you are going like this at some level, right? Think of that power. Think of that power. So it means that as you choose to bring into your life people who are more gutsy than you will become more that way. If you choose to read stories about people who are out there on the edge, you will become more that. And as you read stories of possibility, you will act from that rather than from the fear that it's all over. So I think, and for me, a key in my life, but even before I knew the science behind it, but now I'm more convinced, is that I keep in my heart who I call my lodestars of courage. My lodestars of courage. And I'm just going to mention two women here. Very different places in the world, very different lives. The first one is Deb Simpson, who I'm sure you've never heard of Deb Simpson. Deb was a waitress in Auburn, Maine in the year 2000. But because Maine has public financing for elections, and her friends saw leadership in her, even though she only had a high school education, she ran for office. She won. She was reelected 3 times. She sat on the Judiciary Committee for the state of Maine. She was so stellar that she was chosen to sit on a committee looking at what we do with nuclear waste. What could be more important than that? She was part of what can happen if we get money out of politics. Then she was defeated in the last election because of outside money coming in and over just washing right over what she could do with public financing. But there's a way that we can do that even with this current Supreme Court. And I don't have time to go into it now. I just know that Deb Simpson is my hero. So, my second is this woman. Wangari Maathai is truly my lodestar of courage. I met her again when I met Hans in 2000. And Wangari, what did she do? She planted 7 trees on Earth Day in 1977. And she was bullied and she was humiliated in public, or attempted to. I don't think you can humiliate that proud woman. But she was hospitalized for injuries for her protest. She just kept going. Her 7 trees became, by the time we were there, like 20 million trees, and then 45 million. And then she got the call from the Nobel Peace Prize. And once she got the Nobel Prize, then she had such standing. She joined a global effort with the UN, the UNDP, Plant for the Planet. And their goal was in 2007 was to plant 1 billion trees a year. And I thought, oh, that's pretty ambitious. And you know where we are now? 12 billion trees. So when I think of Wangari, I think, yeah, you planted 7 trees, and they became 12 billion. So Wangari's life is sort of sums up everything that keeps me going with this thinking like an ecosystem. Everything is connected. Everything is a continuous change. We are all part of this co-creation, and therefore, it's not possible to know what's possible. If it's not possible to know what's possible, then we are truly free, totally free, to go for the world we want. Thank you.